Economists are warning the Queensland government's plan to place a cap on rental prices could exacerbate the state's housing crisis. Premier Annastacia Palaszczuk revealed she was considering the proposal in order to address the 300,000 people experiencing housing insecurity. Industry bodies, including the Property Council Queensland, have slammed the policy as misguided. Economists worry it will negatively affect housing affordability as it will discourage people from investing in the rental market. Joining me now for more on this, CEO of the Queensland Council of Social Service, Professor Aimee McVeigh. Thanks very much for your time. Your council's been a supporter of this. What's the problem being addressed here? Because the South East Queensland rental increase has been pretty acute of late. What do you put this down to?
Look, we released a report yesterday authored by Professor Palaszczuk, which demonstrated that there are around 300,000 Queenslanders with unmet housing need. We know that we are in extraordinary times, and the report makes it clear that we can't keep doing things the way we're currently doing them. We need more supply of housing, and we also need a fairer private rental market.
And can you give a very brief synopsis on how you think a rental cap could work?
Look, all we're talking about is injecting some fairness into the market. And I must say that the Premier should be commended for taking this step forward. She's showing leadership, and she's showing that she's listening to the fact that there are so many ordinary Queenslanders out there today who are hurting. The regulations that we would ask for would just set a ceiling to make it really clear how far your rent can be raised, and make sure that it can only happen once a year.
Okay, so what would the ceiling be, and would it just apply to once a person moves in and they have an owner, that's when it's set during that period? If the house is sold or a new tenant comes in, it all gets reset? How would those sort of things work?
Yeah, I think it's really important that it's simple. And so, you move in, you have your rent set, and you have a contract that you sign, and that you know that if it's going to change, it's going to be in a year's time. The legislation should say that, for example, in the ACT, they have a cap in their regulations that say that the cap is the difference, how much inflation's moved between when you moved in and the 12 months later, plus 10%. So it really is setting a cap that's related to how prices have moved in that year. So it's putting some certainty into the market. And I think it's really important to remember that mum and dad investors provide a lot of houses for Queenslanders at the moment. And we need to make sure that they feel comfortable about the market they're investing in. And so this would give some assurance about how much rent they can expect to recoup for their property. But let's be clear, really why you invest in housing is the capital growth, the fact that the house grows in value. It's really not really the case that you're investing in it because of the rental return providing you with a profit.
But the serviceability matters. If you can't service the loan, you're not going to realise that profit. I mean, this would come at the worst possible time for a lot of landlords, wouldn't it, with rates having gone up very quickly, and a lot of them will be feeling the pressure already. Could this mean a lot of sales?
Look, it could, but really, would that? I don't necessarily think that we're looking at a bad thing. We know in Queensland very clearly that we don't have enough houses for our population. And so there is a simple case of supply and demand. People will continue to own these houses and continue to rent them out. And so if they were sold, they'd potentially be sold to someone who is able to service the loan and continue to keep the house on the market and rent it out.
Unless it gets to that point where it's sort of pricing people out, and then you've got whether or not it affects, this is the other argument put forward by various groups, that it affects whether, some of these houses even get built, which we're struggling to do anyway.
Look, I think that's a bit of a scare campaign. As I say, we don't have enough houses for our population, and so there will always be people that need to live in those homes. I really fail to see how putting some certainty into the market to say this is the limit to how much you can increase your rent each year is going to somehow mean that people aren't going to build houses in a market where supply is urgently needed.
All right, got to leave it there. Professor Aimee McVeigh, thank you. So speaking about the potential plan, we'll see more of a thought so far from Annastacia Palaszczuk, just saying she's considering whether or not that happens.